Hi, this is Ariel Etesensya, your info vlogger for today. In this info vlog, I will share to you the information about interpretative approaches 1, which is instrumental rationality. The social sciences study objects that are distinct from those studied in natural sciences, and they must develop their own methods to investigate their objects. The fact that social sciences objects have self-consciousness and perhaps the most obvious distinction. Um, and this is often referred to as reflexivity by sociologists. And there are variety of approaches based on the human capacity for self-awareness and reflection. But they are all involved ways of interpreting the meanings that people assign to their action. And the majority are concerned with the nature of rationality. In this chapter, we look at a group of approaches that, for a reason that will become clear, can be grouped together because they're interested in an instrument notion of rationality. However, the chapter's main subject was less explicitly concerned with the language, but he was deeply concerned with meaning. After discussing we'll look at phenomenological sociology, rational choice theory, and pragmatism, which are all interpretative approaches that fall into the same broad category. Now I will discuss Weber's discussion of objects of the social sciences. Weber's comes from the philosophical tradition that are begun with Kant and further developed at Heidelberg by the Neo-Kantian School of Philosophy. Weber could be classified as an economist, historian, or legal scholar. He is what we call a ontological individualist. The social sciences, according to Weber, study meaningful action than behavior, movement that are the end result of a physical or biological causal chain. This interpretative or hermeneutic tradition is frequently regarded as the most important and radical alternative to positivism. Weber's definition of meaningful social action goes one step beyond a behavior, including action directed at another person. A cyclist, for example, may be taking meaningful action by riding her bike along a country lane, but her collision with another cyclist is not action at all. I'm not acting rationally if I lose my cool and hit a friend. I'm acting less rationally if I'm angry with friend and decide to avoid him for a while. But I am turn my emotion into goal-oriented and action. I'm getting closer to being rational. Weber goes on distinguish four different types of meaningful social action. The first is rational action, which we continue to perform because we have done so in past. The the second type of action is effective action or action motivated by emotion. The third is also on the edge of rationality. If I am overwhelmed by my emotion, it is less rational or non-rational. The fourth the fourth is concerned with ultimate values, which we choose but cannot rationally justify. It it is a feature of human beings, according to Weber, that we value creatures, and there is a classify of action oriented toward ultimate values, values that we choose but cannot justify rationally. We can't find a rational reason for my belief after choosing value, but the action I take as a result of my belief are rational. If I am Christian, I should attend church, pray, and act in a certain ways toward my neighbors. In this world, there is action aimed at achieving something. Practical action, the kind we take every day that is directed toward concrete, attainable goal. Perhaps attitude toward education best illustrate the difference between these last two types of action. Those closest to what Weber regarded as properly rational action. Weber's conception of rationality is that of the use of rational or bring about change in change in the world in the interest of the actor. The value-oriented rationality of particular Protestant group contributed towards the development of instrumental rationality, the rational calculability of modern capitalism. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is Weber's methodology, understanding, and ideal types. We can't find rational reason for my belief after choosing a value, but after actions that follows from my belief are rational. If I am Christian, I should attend church, pray, and treat my neighbors with respect. In this world, there is action aimed at achieving a goal, practical action, the kind we take every day to achieve concrete attainable goal. Perhaps attitude toward education best illustrate the difference um, between these last two types of action. Those closest to Weber's definition of properly rational action. This translation is incorrect as Weber himself states, understanding what is going on in the mind of the actor is required for Versatehen, which is discussion of we understand statistical correlations, makes this point crystal clear. We are likely to believe that if if there is a significant statistical correlation between the number of people living below an official defined poverty level and an increase in theft, the two are linked. In a society with widening wealth disparities, we might see a link between rising uh, poverty rates and higher sales of more expensive consumer goods. How can we gain a common sense understanding of what a situation means to people? As Weber point out, the answer is that we share a culture. More computers are being sold not because there are more poor people, but because there are more people who are comparatively wealthy. This is crucial for interpretative comprehension. Now let's move on to Weber on objectivity and value freedom. In social science, Weber emphasizes the importance of value freedom. However, a study has found that any types of science is surrounded by values on all sides. There is no logical reason to choose between social science and natural science as a career path. Once the decision is made, the value can be rationally pursued and a level of value freedom achieved. But only a social cultural context can be accomplished. Weber's position can be interpreted in a variety of ways, each of which is more complex and interesting. It could be interpreted as an outright relativism in the social sciences, which accepted as knowledge is determined by the scientific communities and wider cultures, norms, and values. What is acceptable in one time period may not be acceptable in another. The values of social science change as a result of cultural change, and social scientists are concerned with various aspects of a complex reality. This is not to say that the Protestant um, ethic thesis is incorrect. Rather, it describes a part of reality that we no longer consider to be as important as once was due to a shift in cultural values. Another historical period, such as late 20th century, may or may not concern with this issue at all, or with a different aspect of the process. Um, all, all of this has a impact on social science, and value freedom is contextual. Now let's move on to another topic, which is phenomenology. Phenomenology, a philosophical foundation for instrumental rationality. Edmund Husserl was the driving force behind the phenomenological philosophy. Despite Despite the fact that Weber was not a phenomenologist, he was interested in a point of view. A phenomenological investigation entails reduction or phenomenological reduction, which is an attempt to put aside what we already know about something and describe how we came to know it. The work of Alfred Schutz in 1962 and 1972. He studied under Husserl and fled to Europe when Hitler rose to power. Smuggling out some of Husserl's work is largely responsible for the translation of this philosophy of consciousness into a philosophy of social science. Alfred Schutz, 1962, provide a phenomenological foundation for Weber's methodology, as well as excellent example of phenomenological reduction. A process of typification is used to identify what is schools, refers to as typical or recurring elements on a stream of experience. My consciousness makes finer distinction as the process progress, but it also performs synthesis that go beyond what is perceived. Richard Schultz examine how we categorize other people into typification. In this book, The Phenomenology of the Social World. Um, these are facts about the social world that we take for granted and used to guide our action. In sort of rational puppet theater, Weber's methodology entails building rational puppets. In sociology, Scoot's work served as the springboard for Harold Garfinkel's in ethnomethodology. The methodology development. This emphasizes what Weber's work already implies. The meanings we submit to phenomenological reduction are the same meaning with the arrive at uh, the conclusion of the investigation. And our next topic is instrumental variation 1, rational choice theory. This goods work can also be seen as laying the groundwork for a rational choice theory, an economics approach born of a marginalist revolution. And similar ideas can be found in behaviorist psychology, 19th century utilitarianism, and American sociology's exchange theory. For example, exchange theory assumes that people will trade activities in order to maximize profits. Scoot's work can be also be thought of as laying the groundwork for rational choice theory. So, um, supply and demand economics are based on the same assumption. I am a free market agent with disposable income and a set of needs and preferences that I prioritize. For example, if I decide that the time to relax is more important to me than to satisfactions I gain from housework, I will hire a cleaner. With the money I would have to give up to pay someone to the housework, the cleaner decide that his or her enjoyment of free time is less important than the wages I pay. In terms of understanding complexity of human motivation and limiting the rule of values, there are important questions that to be raised about rational choice theory. So Weber was a critical of rationality dominance in Western culture, but his definition of rational action is much broader than that of rational choice theories. It is much closer to positivism than Weber, adopting a positive psychology, behaviorism, an attempt to explain human behavior through a process of conditioning involving rewards and punishments, either implicitly or rationality. Um, okay. Rationality choice theory is closer to a natural science, cause-effect model than phenomenology, which is a philosophy of consciousness. Now let's move on to instrumental variation 2, pragmatism and symbolic interactionism. So Pragmatism is a philosophy that started in United States during the second half of the 19th century and is most commonly associated with C.S. Peirce, William James, and John Dewey. Peirce defined our conception of an object as some of the object's practical bearings on our action. Our understanding of objects is based on our practical relationship with them. So, as the relationship changes, so does our knowledge. This isn't necessarily a theory of truth. In fact, as well, we see when we look at the pragmatism is the social science. It is leans towards relativism. However, it is easy to see it as implying that what is true is also what works. The development of pragmatism is traced by Paul Rock through the American interpretation of Hegel's concept of dialectical materialism. So, interactionism focuses on the idea that social science knowledge is based on the community's shared culture. This culture isn't a set of fixed elements, it is a continuous process. The nature of society is so enigmatic that any attempt of discuss is usually absurd. There is no knowledge available to the interactionist that is not already known to a social scientist. As we remove ourselves from the negotiating process, our knowledge becomes less authentic. As Paul Rock put it, pragmatism claims or assumes that the divide between knower and known has been bridged not just in the human sciences but also in the natural sciences by combining evolutionary theory and Hegelian idealism. People act on the basis of meaning that objects have for them, which is developed through social interaction according to Bloom's classic formulation. Interaction in social psychology as developed by Mead 1938 conceptualized the self in pragmatic terms. The self is a process, not an entity, an internal conversation between what those around me tell me about myself and my interpretation of the information as I go about my practical purposes and in the world. In the work of Goffman, for example, the approach's instrumentalism became clearer. I use myself as a tool in my relationship with others. Now let's move on to reasons and causes. Philosophers disagree about whether the link between desire and action is causal. The relationship is causal, according to Keat and Ari, but cause in this context must be understood in positivist sense of contingent regularity. The next chapter will be dig deeper into this viewpoint on rational and action. For the time being, we'll focus on their suggestion that we can come up with a non-positivist causal explanation for human behavior. They claim that our concept of rational agents include the fact that their beliefs and desire cause them to act appropriately. This argument has the flaw of concealing rather than the revealing significance differences and complexities. The, the relationship between language and its nature is one of these complexities. The next chapter will be present a powerful argument in this direction. People can have conflicting desire or be unsure about what they want. They can be driven by desire that is contradictory reason for acting in a certain way. Recognition of this can be found throughout Western literature and philosophy, and through it is most systematically stated in various forms of psychoanalysis. There is no doubt that people have belief and desire, which are linked to their action. Now we are in individualism, holism, and functional explanation. One of the features that distinguishes Weber and some other version of interpretative sociology is the explicit or implicit individualism that underlies attempts to explain the social world. The uniformities of social have been identified by Durkheim and others. Individualist explanation struggle to explain the social uniformities identified by the Durkheim. The mechanism of social change and development are difficult to explain using a holistic approach, sticking to either individualist or holistic argument alone has its own set of challenges. The case against functional explanation is straightforward. Even if a society has needs, there is no way to demonstrate that these needs must be met. The mechanism of change in social system and structures must be identified by holistic explanations. So, historical interpretive approaches could be one way of going about it. For example, the end of the 19th century development of capitalism could be said to need an education system, but the rate of development and type of system were dependent on a variety of factors. On a comparative basis, Weberian account would look at the historical process of developing education system. To summarize, holistic explanations must identify the mechanism of change on social system and structures. And one way to do is maybe through historical interpretative approaches. Okay, so we are in conclusion as a result of differences between the objects studied by the social and the natural sciences. This chapter introduced the concept that the social sciences proceed in a very different manner than the natural sciences. The simplest and most rigid view of rational action, a choice of what the greatest benefit to the actor, is presented by rational choice theory, which is influential in economics and sociology. So Weber's rationality is surrounded by the rationality or partial irrationality of the other three types of social action, those based on the tradition, emotion, and irrationality, selection of ultimate values. The focus of mind is symbolic, interactionism on a collective meaning, negotiation in everyday context. How are we to make sense of overall argument and variations? So it would be strange social science if no consideration was given to how people felt about themselves. Weber's ideas are perhaps the most widely applicable when it comes to defining the task of understanding. Schools provides a method for studying consciousness and the world we take for granted.